Hello and welcome back to another Pod to Profit episode. I'm your host, Liz Fiedler Mergen, and
I'm Abbey.
So today's episode, we are going to introduce a new series that we plan on doing every single month. We will see. Honestly, we'll see if you guys like it.
We like it already, so
I think we're going to do it. So I think we're going to do it. This thought could be an entire episode, and it probably will be. Like, how long do you trial something before you let it go or move on? Can you realistically give something a chance before you give up on it or decide it's here to stay? But we want to do a series once a month called Concept Corner Collective. So essentially, it's collaborative brainstorming of podcast possibilities, because we have a lot of fun with this. We actually, every time, we'll be doing something else. I'm like, that should be a podcast. Because you can make a podcast about anything.
Anything at all.
So the premise of this is we are going to break down different ideas, concepts, and we are going to, and hence the Concept Corner Collective. So here's the Concept Corner. We were going to do, we came up with a lot of names for this. It was like podcast, preview. Yeah, anyway, we came up with a lot of names, but here we are. The Concept Corner Collaboration. Is that what? No. Collective. Shit. Sorry. Concept Corner Collective. Whew, you're going to have to remember that one. So we are going to first break down an idea, and we're going to talk about just an introduction to what the concept would be, what the podcast would be about, the premise, who the audience is. We're going to talk about recurrent segments that could happen. We're going to talk about potential episode topics, and then monetization ideas, and then challenges to consider, community engagement, and essentially just really dive deep into how we would start a podcast about this topic, because we want to help you as listeners realize that, you know, maybe there's something out there for you.
Yeah, or maybe you're like, oh, I want to take this idea and run with it. Please do, because we want to listen.
If you ever take any of these, go for it.
Yep.
So today's that we're going to talk about is coffee.
Because I love coffee.
I love coffee
it's
too.
The first thing I think about in the morning when I wake up.
So why not start a podcast called Coffee Corner, a podcast about all things coffee?
So if this is something you want to do, let's just play pretend here. What you're going to want to do is start creating this podcast. You're going to describe your premise. So maybe it's like a podcast that dives into coffee culture and brewing techniques, history, trends. Maybe it's one of those things. Maybe it's all of those things.
And the audience would be anyone from casual coffee drinkers, aspiring home baristas, or anyone curious about coffee. Now, I think if I were starting this podcast, I'd keep it pretty basic. Because if it's, you know, people that only have these certain types of beans or whatever.
You got to realize you're talking to the Folgers drinkers.
Yes.
Like, keep that in mind when you're starting something like this.
Well, and keep in mind that you have to try, coffee drinkers is specifically enough. So now it's not just coffee drinkers, but it's coffee drinkers who are podcast listeners. And, casual coffee lovers that are trying to take it to the next step, or, just get more enjoyment about their cup of coffee. I mean, my motto is I don't drink shitty coffee. For the most part, I grind my own beans every morning, which is excessive, but I have a little, espresso machine. And to me, it's like the difference between a crappy cup of coffee and a great cup of coffee is a lot. And I enjoy what I enjoy. And then there's Abbey, who will drink Folgers.
Yep. Love a cup of black Folgers.
But I don't do cream. I don't know. I just, whatever.
Did we just start a coffee podcast?
We sure did. Anyway, some recurrent segments that you could have if you had a new coffee podcast would be Bean of the Week. That would be a great one. So just a specific kind of coffee bean, the roast profile, whatever it might be, and then, sharing those tasting notes, the best brewing methods for that type of beans. You could talk about how it's sourced, where it's sourced, or the unique backstory behind the person producing it.
There's a lot you can get into with that. Another reoccurring segment you could do would be like a brew battle where you could like compare two brewing methods, like your grind it yourself, make your espresso, or, you know, just the crappy Mr. Coffee pot that you have where you dump it in.
And sometimes I go for the Mr. Coffee pot. Sometimes. I mean, it depends what the goal is of that cup of coffee. And if it is to be caffeinated to get shit done, like then the pot's coming out. I have a Keurig espresso machine, like the Breville, like latte maker, blah, blah, blah. And I have a Mr. Coffee. And if the Mr. Coffee is out, my husband's like, oh God.
She
like,
means business.
It's going to be a big Saturday.
Another reoccurring segment you could do is something like coffee confessions, where you have listeners submitted stories that are like funny or embarrassing coffee related stories. Maybe they like hang out in coffee shops and they see things and they can share their stories with you and can submit them anonymously and share it that way. I think I would listen to that. Like if there was like some hot gossip coming from the coffee shops, sign me up. I want to hear it.
Well, and I think coffee shops, again, and this is a great way to point out that okay, coffee is the thing, but the way we consume the thing, the places we consume the thing, there are so many subcategories within coffee. And so coffee confessions, you could do a whole recurring segment on breakups that happened in a coffee. If you got broken up with in a coffee shop, if you went on a crappy date in a coffee shop.
Yes,
like,
the horrible first dates. You know they happen all the time.
Or interview or weird networking opportunity that you thought someone was going to hire you and turns out they want you to just volunteer all of your time instead. For example, Abbey, who hosts every single...
Yeah, that happens a lot to me.
Yeah. Hey, can we meet for coffee? Sure.
And honestly, I still say yes because I still want coffee.
Yes, yes. So that could be a whole thing. Cafe Chronicles. So spotlight a unique or historical coffee shop, either locally or internationally. So is Central Perk a real place?
I feel like there was a real Central Perk at one time, but they got a cease and desist to shut down. It was in St. Cloud. In downtown St. Cloud.
Oh, yeah.
There was a
right.
Central Park. They had like the Friends couch and everything, but they got a cease and desist from NBC saying you need to stop. RIP.
Yes. And
But like stories like that, they're everywhere. You know they're not the only place that has tried doing a Central Park.
Well, and I think, I think about Second Street Coffee House in Sartell. She has a like back room for a larger gathering space, and it's named after her mom, who died of Alzheimer's. Like, I think a lot of coffee shops have little stories like that when it comes to, connectivity. So like featuring a unique story about.
Yeah, interview those owners.
Yeah.
That'd be so fun.
Yeah. And then, there's so many coffee shop / bookstore / whatever. Stay tuned. Flower shop. I don't know. Weird.
So let's get into some potential episode topics here and give you some brainstorming ideas for if this is something you want to take and run with it, what you could do. So you could do history deep dives on the origins of things like the global coffee trade or the rise of third wave coffee, or just get into like the nitty gritty of how does the coffee come from places like Central America and make it up to places like Sartell, Minnesota.
I would love a breakdown on brewing methods or achieving latte art at home. Again, I have a little espresso machine. I don't know how to make anything but a latte. Everything's a latte. Although my sister worked at a coffee shop, and so she was trying to teach me about a breve. Breve is half cream, half milk.
Ooh.
Within the latte.
It sounds good.
It's good. Anyway, so if there was some sort of like, how to make that. And again, you don't need an espresso machine, and mine's not that fancy. It's, literally, miles per hour, miles per gallon, miles per cups per whatever. That thing has been used probably 4 times a day on average for 2 years. It's been used.
It doesn't sit there and collect dust. That's for damn
No,
sure.
it's made 1,000 cups of coffee. And, the whole thing cost maybe $550. It's a Breville, and hopefully it lasts a couple more years. I don't know, but it's used pretty hard.
Some other things you can do is chat with coffee roasters. I know locally here in our area, there's so many coffee roasters.
Yes.
I actually interviewed Josh from Eminent Coffee on my own podcast, and I was just expecting like a quick half-hour interview. I was there an hour and a half. He had me roasting my own beans. It was like a really cool, fun thing to do. So go and interview those people. They want to share their story.
Yeah, and I think a whole episode on sustainability issues. So how to drink responsibly. What are some brands that are a little bit more eco-friendly or have better practices than others? Again, we're all trying to just be more aware as, the global effects are starting to really weigh in on us. I mean, right before we were recording this episode, we were talking about something else, but Abbey and I were having a side conversation about how, we're maybe not meant to know everything that goes on at once, right? Like the human heart, human mind, human whatever, like to grasp, every issue in the world. But that's just where we're at with social media, whatever. We know what's going on. So we try to, source from those companies that we know are getting their beans in a sustainable way. I was going to say mining beans, but I don't think you mine coffee beans.
This is why we need a podcast about this, because we need to know if it's mining or farming.
I think it's farming. I don't know.
So let's move on to some monetization ideas here on how to make money from a coffee podcast. First thing you can do is definitely reach out for sponsorship opportunities. You can partner with local roasters. You can partner with local coffee shops. Maybe you could set up a subscription box of some sort for your listeners and make some money off of that. I think there's a lot of different routes you can take, especially locally if you live in an area that has a very vibrant coffee community.
Mm-hmm. And I think even just the equipment needed, like you said, the espresso machines, grinders, containers that would say, coffee corner podcast, or I don't know, bean storage, whatever. But just collaborate with different companies focused on, reusable coffee cups or filters or whatever it might be.
Affiliate marketing is another route you could take with this for brewing equipment, beans, courses for baristas, things like that. You could promote coffee-related books online or online certifications of some sort. There's a lot of affiliate links that you could really tie yourself to.
I think that Patreon could be huge. You could offer bonus episodes like advanced brewing tips or behind the scenes cafe visits, and you could have a little coffee club. I think that this is a podcast that people would really want to be part of, a coffee club tier where, they get a personalized, coffee recommendation or a special mug or something like that they pay with.
You could also go the merchandising route with this, especially for something like coffee. Branded mugs, journals, shirts, hats, stickers. Oh my gosh, people go feral for stickers.
Well, I think that this would be something too that if you had a t-shirt or something that said, I know my shit when it comes to coffee, or I don't know what it would say, but basically something like that. My podcast, Flower Farmer Forum, we're getting ready to get shirts made that say peddling perishable products. Now that there's like 40 people, and like once you join, like now that it's turning into a little bit more of a mastermind, like boom, now you get the shirt, and like that's a thing, or a keychain, or a whatever it might be.
And it's a great conversation starter when you're out in the wild, especially if it doesn't directly have your logo on it, but has something related to your podcast, because people are going to go, well, what's that from? And then you could go, oh, well, I listened to this podcast, and that's what it's all about.
I think that you could totally take this into live events. I would do a meetup from a coffee podcast. I mean, meetups are kind of a weird thing, and stay tuned. Like Abbey and I plan on having meetups for this podcast. I promise we're not murderers. I promise we're not crazy.
We're actually scared of murderers and crazy people.
Yes. So. The Flower Farmer Forum, we have a conference now that literally is a podcast meetup, more or less. And it's, it's turned into like an educational workshop. It's not necessarily I don't know, but I think eventually it'll just turn into a social meetup, like, once a year or whatever, in addition to everything. But I think that this is one that definitely at certain local coffee shops, like, there we go.
Something really cool that the You Betcha podcast did when they were first getting started is they would do live podcasts from small town bars. So that's something you could easily replicate with coffee shops, is go do a live podcast at a local coffee shop.
Yeah, I think that there would be some hurdles in a coffee podcast, because I'm willing to bet there are probably a lot of them already out there.
Yeah, that's very true. But the thing is, there's a lot of podcasts about a lot of things out there.
But I think if you find that unique angle, whether you're focusing on, coffee origins, or, a regional, keep it regional, keep it whatever it might be. I think that as long as you stay consistent without really burning out. So like, I think a rotating schedule of recurring segments would be really helpful for something like this.
Yeah, so like once a month you have an interview, once a month you're focusing on the history of something, that sort of thing. It'll keep things fresh and relevant and still keep generating some new ideas.
I think one challenge that I've shared, I've tried to really stay away from, and I've definitely turned down a lot of money based on the long game, and who knows if this is a good idea or not. But like the Flower Farmer Forum podcast, I've had a lot of different equipment companies and a lot more like farm related things, businesses reach out for sponsorships, and they've wanted like a 6-month sponsorship, or they've wanted something a little more authentic review within the episode. And it's like, that's really hard to do because I want to do episodes on business, or I want to do episodes on goal setting or my personal social media, marketing, whatever, all the other parts of farming or running a business. So I think that it could be a dangerous flirtation line of if you get approached by Starbucks. Yes, if all of a sudden Starbucks says, hey, will you now, we'll give you $500 an episode. Will you just talk about Starbucks?
You can only talk about the gingerbread lattes the entire month of December.
Or, their specific varieties that they have that they sell in store. Like maybe the short-term gain of, oh my God, for $500, I'll talk about whatever you want me to talk about. But I'm pretty sure that your listeners are going to quit listening.
Yeah, it's a delicate little line to toe, but you'll figure it out as you go. So looking at some community engagement options here, just a little idea here and there for building an engaged audience, because especially for something like a coffee podcast, you're going to want your audience to be dedicated and engaged to this. So starting a Facebook group or a Discord group to have people actually engaging in a conversation, great idea. We've seen a lot of success with that with the Flower Farmer Forum podcast.
Yeah, and encourage listeners to submit their favorite brewing hacks or recommended beans. You can have a little bean of the week segment, whatever it might be, and say, hey, so-and-so sent this in. Definitely Instagram, TikTok, quick brewing tips, latte art videos, reviews of coffee gadgets. You really could bring it off the pod.
For sure.
As we cool kids say, off the pod.
Off the pod.
Off the pod. Anyway. So there was our idea for Coffee Corner. All right, that was our Concept Corner Collective for this month. I think in full transparency, this is the first one of these that we're going to do. We're going to do it again. I like this idea.
I like the concept. I'm not sold on the name.
I don't like Concept Corner Collective. We need something else.
Yeah.
We're going to come up with a new name. But every month, we're going to come up with an idea, and we're going to break it apart and tell you how we would start a podcast, how you could monetize something like that. They're not all going to be educational. Some will be entertainment. But yeah, I'm really excited to continue this segment of the Concept Corner Collective. We need a new name.
Working title.
Working title.
In the meantime, be sure that you subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to check out all of our free resources that we have for you in the show notes below.
Thanks for listening.